Millionaire CEO saw black, Maid sleeping on the floor with the twins. What he did next was unexpected. The security footage showed 2:47 a.m. But what the millionaire CEO found in his children's nursery that night would shatter everything he thought he knew about his own life. There she was, Eulalie Baptiste, the woman who cleaned his marble floors and prepared his gourmet meals, curled up on the cold hardwood floor of his twins' bedroom. No blanket, no pillow, just her exhausted body forming a protective circle around 6-year-old Isolde and Cashin, who had somehow migrated from their $1,000 beds to sleep beside their maid. Dorian Voss stood frozen in his Italian leather shoes, rain-soaked suit still dripping from his late return home. The man who commanded billion-dollar boardrooms couldn't move, because what he was witnessing demolished every assumption he'd built his empire on. Here's what you need to understand. Dorian paid this woman $800 a week to live in his penthouse and care for his children. That's $41,600 a year. His watch cost more than that. His monthly wine bill exceeded her entire salary. Yet there she was, sleeping on a floor so cold you could see her breath in the air-conditioned room. Have you ever walked into a room and realized your entire world was a lie? That every success story you told yourself was built on someone else's invisible suffering? That's exactly what hit Dorian, like a freight train, at 2:47 a.m. on that October night. But here's the part that will make your blood boil. Lala had been doing this for 8 months. 8 months of choosing the nursery floor over her tiny basement room because the twins had nightmares and needed comfort their billionaire father was too busy to provide. 8 months of sacrificing her own basic comfort because these children meant more to her than her own physical well-being. Drop your location and current time in the comments right now. I want to see where in the world people still care about human decency. Because what I'm about to tell you next will test everything you believe about justice and redemption. Before we go any further into this story, I need to ask you something crucial. If you truly believe that every person deserves dignity regardless of their background, prove it by hitting that subscribe button. Because if you don't, you're part of the problem that allows these situations to exist in the first place. You're basically saying it's okay for hard-working people to sleep on floors while their employers live in luxury. So what would you do in this situation? You're standing there, watching the woman who raised your children better than you ever did, shivering on your marble floor because she can't afford basic furniture on the salary you pay her. Would you turn around and pretend you never saw it? Would you fire her for overstepping boundaries? Or would you finally face the uncomfortable truth about what your success really costs? Because what Dorian did next didn't just change Lala's life. It exposed a scandal that rocked Manhattan's elite, destroyed his reputation, and sparked a transformation so shocking that 5 years later, people still can't believe it actually happened. The truth is, 25 years ago, Dorian and Lala weren't that different. Both grew up with empty refrigerators. Both knew the sound of eviction, notices sliding under doors. Both fell asleep to the noise of parents arguing about money they didn't have. The difference? One lottery ticket changed everything for the Voss family when Dorian was 17. His mother won $50,000, enough to send him to community college instead of the factory floor that claimed his father's lungs. Lala's family never bought lottery tickets. They couldn't afford the dollar. While Dorian was studying computer programming in air-conditioned classrooms, Lala was 14 years old, selling mangoes on Port-au-Prince street corners to help her grandmother pay for medicine. When the 2010 earthquake hit Haiti, Dorian was celebrating his first $1 million software contract. Lala was pulling her younger brother's lifeless body from the rubble of their collapsed school. Fast forward to 2023. Dorian's penthouse spans 8,000 square feet across the top 2 floors of a Manhattan skyscraper. His master bathroom is larger than most people's apartments. The shower has 6 heads and costs more per month in water bills than most families spend on rent. His walk-in closet holds 200 custom suits, each worth more than Lala makes in 2 months. Lala's room in the basement of that same penthouse measures 8 feet by 10 feet. No windows, The ceiling is so low she has to duck when she stands near the door. Her entire wardrobe fits in a plastic dresser from Walmart. She owns 3 pairs of shoes, work sneakers, church heels, and flip-flops with holes in them that she's too ashamed for the twins to see. Here's what Dorian's daily routine looked like. Wake up at 5 a.m. to a $3,000 Italian espresso machine. Breakfast prepared by Lala, fresh squeezed orange juice, organic eggs Benedict, truffle-infused everything. 30-minute helicopter ride to his office because Manhattan traffic was beneath him. Lunch meetings at restaurants where the wine costs more than most people's monthly car payments. Lala's routine. Wake up at 4:30 a.m. to start Dorian's breakfast. Eat leftover scraps, standing over the kitchen sink. Spend the day scrubbing toilets that cost more than her grandmother's house in Haiti. Fall asleep at midnight after getting the twins ready for bed. A job that should have been their father's. The most heartbreaking part? Every month, Lala wired $600 of her $800 salary back to Haiti. Her grandmother was diabetic. Her nephew needed school supplies. Her cousin required surgery after a motorcycle accident. That left her with $200 monthly for everything else. Phone bill, subway cards, the few groceries Dorian didn't provide, and any hope of saving for her own future. Meanwhile, Dorian spent more than that on single bottles of wine he forgot to drink. But here's where the story gets twisted. Dorian genuinely believed he was a good man. He donated millions to charity. Tax deductible, of course. He gave speeches about lifting up disadvantaged communities. He even sponsored scholarships for inner-city kids. The man who let his employees sleep on floors was simultaneously writing checks to help strangers. If this story is making you uncomfortable about wealth inequality, good. That discomfort means you still have a conscience. Subscribe if you want more stories that challenge these injustices. The night Dorian discovered Lala on that floor, he wasn't returning from some glamorous party. He was coming home from his daughter's sold school play, the one he'd missed because a board meeting ran late. Again, the same daughter who'd stopped asking him to read bedtime stories, because Lala was the only one who ever showed up. His son Cashin had started calling Lala Mama Lala and Dorian Mr. Daddy, as if his own father was just another formal authority figure who occasionally appeared in their lives wearing expensive suits and disappointed expressions. The marriage that crumbled? His ex-wife didn't leave because of another woman. She left because Dorian's first love was always success, and she got tired of being the mistress in that relationship. The custody battle was brief. She didn't fight for the twins because she knew they were better off with a nanny who actually raised them. Standing there at 2:47 a.m., watching the only mother figures his children really knew shiver on his marble floors, Dorian realized something that would haunt him forever. He'd become everything he once despised about the rich people who'd looked down on his family in Detroit. That realization hit him like a physical blow, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared him for what he saw when he actually stepped into that nursery. Lala wasn't just sleeping on the floor. She was positioned like a human shield between the twins and the door, her body curved protectively around them even in unconsciousness. Her right hand was still holding Cashin's fingers. Her left arm served as a soul's pillow. Both children had tear stains on their cheeks, dried evidence of nightmares that had clearly woken them hours earlier. The room told a story Dorian had never bothered to read. Lala's work shoes were placed precisely by the door, aligned perfectly as if she was ready to jump up at a moment's notice. A glass of water sat on the nightstand, not for her, but positioned exactly where Cashin could reach it when his anxiety attacks made his mouth go dry. Isolde's favorite stuffed elephant was tucked under Lala's chin, as if even the child's comfort toy had gravitated toward the only adult who provided actual comfort. But what destroyed him completely was the sound. Lala was humming in her sleep, a soft, melodic lullaby in Haitian Creole that he'd heard drifting from the nursery countless times but never truly listened to. The same lullaby that now mixed with her shallow, exhausted breathing and the twins' peaceful sighs. Thunder cracked outside, rattling the floor-to-ceiling windows, and Dorian watched the son instinctively move closer to Lala without waking up, not toward his own bed, not calling for his father, seeking protection from the woman, who slept on floors to keep him safe. The lightning illuminated something else that made Dorian's knees buckle. Lala was wearing his old Columbia University t-shirt, the one he'd thrown in the donation pile months ago. She'd retrieved it, washed it, and it now served as her pajamas. The shirt that represented his escape from poverty had become her only comfort in the basement, where she lived like his prisoner. His mind rocketed back to Detroit, 1995. Age 8, his own mother sleeping on their apartment floor, because she'd given him and his sister the only mattress after their father spent the furniture money on lottery tickets and bourbon. He remembered the way she'd curl around them during winter nights when the heat got shut off, her body becoming their blanket, their safety, their everything. The memory was so vivid he could smell his mother's drugstore shampoo, feel her rough hands smoothing his hair, hear her whispering promises that tomorrow would be better. Promises she kept by working 3 jobs and skipping meals so her children could eat. Now here was another mother, not his children's biological mother, but the woman who'd stepped into that role, making the exact same sacrifice his own mother had made. Except this time, he wasn't the child needing protection. He was the man with the power to change everything, and he'd been too blind to see it. Dorian's vision blurred. His chest tightened. For the first time in 20 years, the man who'd conquered Wall Street couldn't control his breathing. But here's what an 01 saw coming next. Instead of waking them up, instead of quietly retreating to process his revelation, Dorian did something that would have shocked anyone who knew the ruthless CEO. He sat down on the floor, right there in his $5,000 suit, still dripping rainwater on his Persian rug. He lowered himself to the ground and just watched. For 47 minutes, he sat motionless, studying the 3 people who become a family without him. He watched Lala's face relax in ways it never did when she was awake and aware of his presence. He saw how naturally his children fit against her, how their breathing synchronized with hers. He noticed the way Isolde's hand rested on Lala's heart, as if even in sleep she needed to feel its steady beat. The storm outside grew violent, but inside this makeshift family remained peaceful, protected, complete. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just about money or sleeping arrangements. This was about love. Real, unconditional, sacrificial love. The kind that chooses discomfort over distance. The kind that gives up everything for someone else's well-being. The kind he'd forgotten how to feel in his climb to the top. At 3:34 a.m., Lala's eyes fluttered open. She saw him immediately, not with a startled jump of someone caught doing something wrong, but with a resigned acceptance of someone who'd always known this moment would come. Her gaze held no apology, no shame, just quiet dignity and a question, what happens now? The rain had stopped. The room was silent except for the twins' gentle breathing. And in that silence, Dorian Voss, the man who built an empire on calculated decisions and cold logic, made a choice that would destroy everything he'd spent his lifetime building. That choice? He whispered her name. Lala. She didn't move to get up, didn't scramble to explain herself. Instead, she gently extracted herself from the sleeping twins, covered them with the blanket from Isolde's bed, and followed him out of the nursery. No words. Just the soft padding of her bare feet on marble floors worth more than she'd ever owned. 7 a.m. sharp. Dorian's office. The same room where he'd fired executives, crushed competitors, and made decisions that affected thousands of lives. The morning sunlight streamed through windows that offered view of Central Park, but neither of them looked outside. They sat across from each other at his mahogany desk. The billionaire in yesterday's wrinkled suit, the maid in his old college t-shirt and worn pajama pants. How long have you been sleeping on that floor? He asked. 8 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. Her response was immediate, precise. She'd been counting. Why didn't you tell me? Lala's laugh held no humor. Tell you what exactly? That your children have nightmares every single night because their mother abandoned them and their father works 18-hour days? That Cashin wakes up screaming for someone who cares, and a soul cries herself to sleep asking why nobody wants to spend time with her. Dorian's throat constricted. I work to provide for them. You work to avoid them. Her voice remained steady, but her hands trembled slightly. Those children don't need another trust fund. They need a parent who shows up. I pay you well. You pay me $800 a week. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. Her bank statement. Want to see where that money goes? $600 to Haiti every month. My grandmother's insulin costs $200. My nephew's school fees are $150. My cousin needs surgery, so I send another $100 when I can. That leaves me with $200 for 4 weeks of living in New York City. She spread the paper on his desk. Subway card, $127 monthly. Phone bill, $35. That leaves me $38 for everything else. Food that you don't provide. Soap, toothpaste, tampons. Sometimes I have to choose between taking the subway to church on Sunday or having lunch that week. Dorian stared at the numbers. His monthly parking spot cost more than her entire discretionary budget. Last month, I needed new work shoes. These have holes in the soles, see? She lifted her foot, showing worn-through sneakers held together with clear tape. But Cashin needed a new inhaler for his asthma, and your insurance doesn't cover the brand that actually works for him. So I chose his breathing over my feet. If you've ever had to choose between dignity and survival, this story is for you. And if you haven't, then you need to subscribe because this perspective is exactly what privileged people need to understand. Why the floor? He pressed. You have a room. Have you seen my room? Her composure finally cracked. It's a closet with no windows. The ceiling leaks when it rains. There's black mold growing behind a dresser that makes me cough all night. But your children's room is warm and safe, so when they're scared, that's where I sleep. Because somebody has to care enough to be there when they wake up afraid. The words hit him like physical blows. I didn't know. You didn't want to know. She stood up, and suddenly the power dynamic in the room shifted completely. You want to believe you're a good man because you rescued these kids from foster care after your wife left. But you didn't rescue them. You just moved them from one place where nobody had time for them to another. That's not fair. Fair. Lala's voice rose for the first time. You want to talk about fair? Your watch costs more than I make in a year. Your car payment exceeds my total income. You spent more on wine last month than I've ever had in my bank account at one time. But I'm the one holding your children when they cry. I'm the one teaching them to read, helping with homework, kissing scraped knees. I'm living like I'm in poverty while raising your children like they're my own. Tears she'd held back for months finally fell. So don't you dare talk to me about fair when I'm sleeping on floors in a penthouse because I can't afford furniture while you step over homeless people on your way to buy another suit. The silence stretched between them, heavy with truths that had been buried too long. Outside, Manhattan woke up to another day of inequality disguised as success. Inside this office, two people from the same world of struggle, one who'd escaped, one who remained trapped, finally saw each other clearly. Dorian did something no one expected. He cried, not the controlled, single tear down the cheek moment you see in movies. This was raw, ugly sobbing from a man who hadn't allowed himself to feel anything real in 20 years. His shoulders shook. His breathing became ragged. And Lala, the woman he'd just discovered had been sacrificing everything for his children, stood there watching the most powerful man she knew completely fall apart. I'm sorry, he choked out between gasps. God, Lala, I'm so sorry. She didn't comfort him, didn't rush to his side with tissues or gentle words. Instead, she waited, let him feel the full weight of what his blindness had cost. When his breathing finally steadied, she spoke. Sorry doesn't pay for new shoes. Sorry doesn't fix the mold in my room. Sorry doesn't give me back the 8 months I spent choosing between dignity and caring for your children. Then tell me what does. The question hummed between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to name. Lala studied his face, searching for the catch. the manipulation, the self-serving angle that always came with powerful men's promises. She found none. Triple my salary. Give me proper living quarters. Respect the fact that I'm not your property. Done. Just like that. Just like that. Something shifted in that moment. The employer-employee barrier didn't disappear, but it cracked enough to let something else seep through. Something dangerous. 3 weeks later, Dorian found himself doing something he'd never done before. Eating dinner in his own kitchen. Not the formal dining room where he usually took meetings, but the actual kitchen where Lala prepared meals he'd been taking to his office for 2 years. "Why Haitian food?" he asked, watching her hands work magic with spices he couldn't pronounce. "Why Italian suits?" she countered, not looking up from the stove. "Touché." He laughed, genuinely laughed, for the first time in months. "But seriously, I've been eating your cooking for 2 years and never asked about it." Lala paused, wooden spoon halfway to her mouth for tasting. "You want the real answer?" "I want everything real from now on. My grandmother taught me that food is how we survive losing everything else. When the earthquake took our house, our pictures, our neighbors, our normal life, we still had the recipes in our heads. Still had the way certain spices could make a plate of rice taste like home." She ladled the stew into bowls, the aroma rich with memories. "This dish? Soup jumu. We eat it every New Year's Day to celebrate Haiti's independence. It was illegal for slaves to eat it when the French controlled us. So every January 1st, we make it to remember we're free." Dorian took a bite, and flavors exploded across his palate. Complex, layered, nothing like the bland cuisine he'd grown accustomed to at business dinners. "It's incredible. Freedom tastes better when you've been denied it." Their eyes met across the kitchen island, and something electric passed between them. Not just attraction, though that was definitely there, but recognition. Two people who clawed their way up from nothing. Sitting in a kitchen worth more than most people's houses, sharing food that tasted like revolution. "Tell me about Detroit," she said. So he did. Not the sanitized version he told at board meetings about overcoming adversity, but the real story. Roaches in the cereal boxes. Turning the oven on for heat in winter. His father's hands, scarred and swollen from factory work. Teaching to fix electrical outlets because they couldn't afford to call anyone. The shame of using food stamps at the grocery store where his classmates shopped. The worst part wasn't being poor, he admitted. It was being invisible. Having people look through you like you didn't exist, or look down on you like poverty was contagious. And now you're the one looking down. He met her gaze. "I won't anymore. Real talk. If you think love should know no boundaries of class or race, prove it by subscribing. Because every person who doesn't subscribe is basically saying they support these outdated prejudices." The conversations became nightly rituals. After the twins went to bed, they'd find themselves in the kitchen or on the terrace or in the library, sharing stories that neither had ever told anyone else. Lala described the weight of survivor's guilt, how every dollar she sent to Haiti came with the knowledge that she'd escaped when others hadn't. Dorian talked about imposter syndrome, how he still woke up, sometimes convinced someone would discover he didn't belong in boardrooms and penthouses. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met differently?" he asked one night, 6 weeks after the floor incident. They were in the conservatory, a glass-walled room filled with tropical plants that his decorator had insisted would add life to the space. Neither had ever spent time there before, but it had become their refuge, the one place in the penthouse that felt separate from their complicated history. "You mean if I wasn't your employee? If we were just two people?" Lala was quiet for a long time, her fingers tracing patterns on the arm of her chair. "I think about it more than I should." The admission hit the air between them like lightning. Suddenly, the space felt smaller, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. She was still technically his employee. He was still technically her boss. But in this room, surrounded by plants that somehow made breathing feel easier, they were also just two people who'd been alone for far too long. Lala, I know what you're going to say. This is complicated, inappropriate, potentially destructive. Actually, I was going to say that I haven't felt this connected to another person in 20 years, and I'm terrified of losing it. She looked at him then, really looked at him. Not the CEO, not the man who signed her paychecks, but the person who'd sat on a nursery floor in a $5,000 suit just to understand what love looked like. What are you asking me, Dorian? The question that would change everything. I'm asking if you'd let me try to earn something I never thought I deserved. Before Lala could respond, the conservatory door burst open. Margaret, the head housekeeper who'd worked for family for 12 years, stood frozen in the doorway. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock to something that looked like betrayal. I was looking for... Margaret's voice trailed off as she took in the scene. Dorian and Lala sitting close enough to touch, the air between them charged with intimacy that was impossible to miss. Margaret, Dorian started, but she was already gone, her sensible shoes clicking rapidly down the marble hallway. By morning, every member of the household staff knew. The whisper started in the kitchen at 6 a.m., carried to the laundry room by noon, and reached the building's doorman by evening. Not malicious gossip. Most of the staff genuinely loved Lala. But in a world where rich white men's scandals were currency, information this explosive had a way of traveling. 3 days later, Dorian's phone rang during a board meeting. "Sir, we have a problem." His publicist's voice was tight with panic. Page 6 is running a story tomorrow. Billionaire CEO's steamy affair with his children's nanny. The blood drained from Dorian's face. Around the conference table, 12 of Manhattan's most powerful executives watched his composure crumble in real time. "They have photos, Dorian. You two in the conservatory. Her hand on your face. The way you're looking at each other, it's undeniable." Board member Patricia Hawthorne leaned forward, her voice ice cold. "Is there something you need to share with us, Dorian?" The story broke at midnight. By 6 a.m., news vans lined the street outside his building. Reporters shouted questions about inappropriate workplace relationships and exploitation of domestic workers. Social media exploded with hashtags like #privilege-abuse and #justice-for-Lala. The twins found out when Isolde's teacher pulled her aside at school. "Sweetheart, there are some photographers outside today. Your father's assistant will pick you up early." "Why are there photographers?" Isolde asked. "Maybe you should ask your dad about that." But when they got home, Dorian was locked in crisis meetings with lawyers and PR specialists. So it was Lala who sat them down in the living room, hands shaking as she tried to find age-appropriate words for an adult complicated situation. "Some people are saying things about me and your father that aren't true," she began. "What kind of things?" Cashin's anxiety was already spiking. "They're saying that he and I..." Lala struggled. How do you explain to 6-year-olds that the world was trying to turn their love into something ugly? Isolde, wise beyond her years, filled in the blanks. "They think Daddy likes you the way married people like each other." Something like that. "Do you?" Cashin asked with the brutal honesty of childhood. Lala's throat tightened. "It's complicated, baby. But you're not leaving us, right?" Isolde's voice broke. "Everyone always leaves." The next morning brought worse news. The story had evolved. Anonymous sources, former employees, bitter business rivals, were coming forward with additional information. Claims about inappropriate behavior. Suggestions that Dorian had been grooming his domestic staff. Accusations that this was part of a pattern. None of it was true, but truth didn't matter when scandal sold newspapers. The Voss Industries stock price dropped 12% in 2 days. Board members were fielding calls from major investors threatening to pull funding. The company's biggest client, a family values corporation, issued a statement about reevaluating their partnerships. Patricia Hawthorne cornered Dorian after an emergency board meeting. "You need to end this. Fire her. Issue a statement denying everything. Do whatever damage control is necessary." "I'm not firing Lala." then you're fired. Her smile was sharp as broken glass. The board is calling for a vote of no confidence. You have until Friday to clean this up or you're out. That night, Dorian sat in his study, staring at resignation letters he drafted and deleted a dozen times. Outside, protesters had joined the reporters. Signs reading "Protect Domestic Workers" and economic exploitation filled the street. His children were getting death threats from strangers on the internet. Lala couldn't leave the building without being followed by cameras. His life's work was crumbling because he dared to feel something real for the first time in decades. But what happened next shocked everyone. Instead of backing down, instead of choosing his empire over the woman who'd shown him what love actually looked like, Dorian Voss did something that would be talked about in business schools for decades. He called a press conference. On Friday morning, Dorian walked onto that press conference stage and said the words that would end his corporate career forever. "My name is Dorian Voss, and I've been a hypocrite." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. But he continued, his voice steady. "I've spent 20 years lecturing about corporate responsibility while paying the woman who raised my children a salary that forced her to sleep on floors. I've donated millions to charity while ignoring the suffering in my own home. You want to know if I'm in love with Eulalie Baptiste? Yes, absolutely. And the real scandal isn't that a billionaire fell for his employee. It's that it took me this long to see her humanity." He pulled out a prepared statement, but set it aside. "Effective immediately, I'm taking a sabbatical from Voss Industries. Not because the board demanded it, but because I need to learn how to be the man my children and Lala deserve. The man my mother raised me to be before I forgot where I came from." The stock price crashed 23% that day. Patricia Hawthorne assumed the role of interim CEO by noon. But something unexpected happened in the weeks that followed, something no one saw coming. The story shifted. Social media, which had initially condemned Dorian, began sharing clips of his press conference. #RealAccountability started trending. Workers across the country began sharing their own stories about wealthy employers who treated them as invisible. But the real transformation was happening inside the penthouse walls. Dorian didn't just raise Lala's salary. He tripled it, retroactively for the past 2 years, and handed her a check for $127,000 in back pay. He converted the entire basement level into a proper apartment with windows, a full kitchen, and space for the future she'd never been able to envision. "I don't need charity," Lala told him when he presented the apartment keys. "It's not charity, it's justice. 20 years overdue." The twins watched these changes with a sharp awareness that only children who've lived through loss possess. But their reaction surprised everyone. Cashin, who'd struggled with anxiety since his mother left, began sleeping through the night for the first time in 2 years. Not because his nightmares stopped, but because he finally felt secure enough to believe the adults in his life weren't going anywhere. "Lala's not just our nanny anymore, is she?" he asked his father one evening. "What do you think she is?" "Family," Cashin said without hesitation. "She's always been family. You just finally notice." Isolde, the more reserved twin, had a different response. She started taking photography classes, documenting the changes happening around her. Her first exhibition, held in the Penthouse Conservatory 6 months later, featured portraits of domestic workers titled "Invisible No More." The collection raised $50,000 for immigrant worker advocacy groups. "I want people to see what you couldn't see," she told her father at the opening. Meanwhile, Lala was discovering parts of herself that had been buried under years of survival mode. With financial security for the first time in her adult life, she enrolled in business classes and launched Lala's Kitchen, a catering company specializing in Haitian cuisine that employed other immigrant women at living wages. Her first major contract? Catering the launch party for the Voss Foundation, Dorian's new nonprofit dedicated to domestic worker rights and fair wage initiatives. "You could have chosen any caterer in Manhattan," Lala said as she watched socialites discover the magic of authentic Haitian flavors. "I chose the best," Dorian replied. Plus, it's the only restaurant where the owner lets me wash dishes. That was their new routine. 3 nights a week, after the twins finished homework, Dorian would arrive at Lala's commercial kitchen and spend hours doing prep work, cleaning equipment, learning the business from the ground up. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms now found peace in the simple rhythm of chopping vegetables and wiping down counters. The media called it a publicity stunt. The workers at Lala's kitchen called it something else: respect. But the real moment of transformation came 8 months after the press conference during Cashin's 7th birthday party. Instead of the elaborate affairs Dorian used to plan, events more suited to impressing other adults than celebrating a child, this party happened in the penthouse living room with 12 of Cashin's classmates, homemade cake, and party games that actually involved the birthday boy having fun. Watching his son laugh, genuinely, freely, without the forced smiles that had characterized family photos for years, Dorian felt something he'd forgotten existed. Contentment that wasn't tied to achievement. Happy? Lala asked, finding him in a quiet moment. Completely. He looked around the room filled with children's laughter, friends from all backgrounds, and the woman who taught him what love without conditions looked like. I never knew contentment could feel this good. 3 years later, everything had changed, and nothing had changed. Lala still woke up at 5 a.m. every morning, but now she was preparing for the day ahead at her restaurant, not scrubbing someone else's floors. The woman who once counted every dollar now employed 15 people at wages that allowed them to afford furniture for their own apartments. Dorian still worked 18-hour days, but instead of conquering markets, he was conquering inequality. The Voss Foundation had become the largest domestic worker advocacy organization on the East Coast, responsible for helping pass living wage legislation in 6 states. The twins, now 10 years old, still came home to the same penthouse, but it no longer felt like a museum. Isolde's photographs covered the walls where abstract art used to hang. Cashin's soccer trophies shared shelf space with Lala's business awards. The formal dining room had been converted into a homework space where neighborhood kids gathered after school for tutoring sessions run by Lala's employees. And every evening, the 4 of them sat around the kitchen table sharing meals and stories. Not because hierarchy demanded it, but because love invited it. Do you ever miss it? Lala asked Dorian one evening as they watched the twins teach origami to their friends. The old life, the power, the simplicity of not caring about anyone but yourself. Dorian considered the question seriously. I miss the certainty, he admitted. When you only care about profit, every decision is easy. When you care about people, every choice becomes complicated. But I sleep better now, even when the decisions are harder. That conversation happened 6 months ago. Last week, something occurred that proved just how completely their world had transformed. Patricia Hawthorne, the woman who'd taken over Voss Industries after his resignation, was arrested for tax evasion and money laundering. The company's stock price was in free fall. The board of directors, facing bankruptcy, came at Dorian with an offer: return as CEO, restore the company's reputation, save thousands of jobs. The old Dorian would have seen this as vindication, proof that he'd been indispensable all along. The new Dorian saw it differently. I'll consult on the transition, he told them, help you find ethical leadership. But I'm not coming back to a world where success is measured by how much you can take from others. Instead, he made a different choice, one that shocked even Lala. He liquidated his remaining shares in Voss Industries, worth $847 million, and distributed the money. Half went to domestic worker organizations worldwide. A quarter funded scholarships for immigrant children. The remainder established an endowment, ensuring Lala's Kitchen could employ and train women escaping poverty for generations to come. You gave away everything, Lala whispered when he told her. No, he corrected. I gave away money. I kept everything that matters. Here's what this story really teaches us. True wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's what you're willing to give up for the people you love. Dorian spent 20 years building an empire that isolated him from human connection. It took one night of seeing clearly to realize that all his success was worthless if it came at the cost of his soul. The dangerous part about privilege isn't that it makes you cruel. It makes you blind. When you're insulated by wealth, it becomes easy to ignore the suffering that sustains your comfort. Dorian wasn't a monster. He was just a man who'd stopped seeing the people around him as fully human. The scariest part? Most of us do this every single day. Love doesn't recognize barriers that society creates. Race, class, education, background. These are artificial divisions designed to keep us separated. Real connection happens when we're brave enough to see past these labels and recognize our shared humanity. But here's the most important lesson. Redemption requires action, not just awareness. Dorian could have felt guilty about Lala's situation and done nothing. He could have given her a raise and called it even. Instead, he dismantled the entire system that created the inequality in the first place. That's the difference between guilt and transformation. Listen, if this story didn't move you to subscribe, then you're exactly the type of person who would walk past someone sleeping on the floor and do nothing. Don't be that person. Hit subscribe and prove you actually care about justice and human dignity. And if you still won't subscribe after hearing this story, at least have the courage to tell me why in the comments. I'll be waiting. For everyone who did subscribe, welcome to a community that believes in transformation, second chances, and breaking down the barriers that divide us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just people trying to find our way home. Some of us sleep on marble floors. Some of us own the marble, but we all deserve to be seen, valued, and loved for who we really are underneath it all.